I'm not saying that I'm not going to oppose, and I'm co-signing, every
So you don't mean
policy.
unconditional?
No, I don't mean in that sense. I mean unconditional, because we give $3.5 billion to Israel every year. Now we give $2.3 billion to Egypt, which has no human rights, and we give $1 billion to Jordan, which has no human rights, and we give $800 million a year to the Palestinian Authority, which uses that money to pay bounties to Palestinians who kill Jews, not government officials, but Jewish civilians. So if you go to Israel and if you kill a Jew anywhere in the world and you're a Palestinian, the Palestinian Authority will pay you money for that. And they will.
I don't know enough to push back on this.
So I know. I
have to push back on you, because just so I don't look like I don't have a spine at all.
Yeah. So
Jeez.
I mean, you can tell by the look on Jimmy's face, he's a little dumbfounded by someone who's seemingly a pretty intelligent person.
Yeah.
Talking so much stupid.
It's like when you park your car in the parking lot, and there's one little spot on the end that's not quite big enough for another car to park in, and a guy comes and parks up on the sidewalk right next to your truck, and you're like, why did he? What the? And you're just like, oh, damn, that's all of that, huh? And that's kind of the look that Jimmy was giving RFK. Like really, you're gonna park right there with that?
He's like, you're fucking spewing some bullshit right to my face, dude.
It's like, bro, it
like
says
you're
no
in
parking.
my studio, you're in my house, and you're fucking straight up propaganda. Like you're spewing propaganda. Like you can just kind of see it, but he knows he's not in a position to actually push back on some of this because it's propaganda. And like when you're trying to debunk propaganda, you have to know the actual counter to what they're saying. You have to know the truth, to really be able to recognize it and to be able to call it out, and not get just destroyed trying to call it out. So I mean, he kind of set himself up in a bad position talking about this without having the actual information to back up, it's just he didn't do his homework.
I wish Jimmy had done a little bit more, or maybe already had someone on that could, maybe like Max or even like Aaron Mate in the background to be able to kind of rebut some of his comments. The one thing I do want to, I as someone who looks at Palestine a lot and realizes that there is a lot of different, viewpoints that people can have on Palestinians that are fighting for what they feel is their just right to exist, because that's kind of what a lot of Palestinians are feeling, is like they don't even have a right to exist, let alone be a citizen within the country with which they reside. And Max Blumenthal also brought this up as well, that like what RFK is saying about the suicide bombing and that they're going to pay. And then I think later on he talks about like streets being named after people.
He says that later in the interview.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say that like those kinds of things didn't happen. They did. But that was, well over 15 to 18 years ago that those kinds of things stopped. And the reason why and this is going to be controversial to probably some people, but the reason why Palestinians are doing what they're doing, whether you agree with them or not, and I don't condone terrorist actions and I don't condone taking the life of people in any regard. I'm very anti-war and I'm pro-peace. But I also understand that you cannot come into someone's home, come onto people's land that have been there for generations and expect them to just kind of bend over and take it. We don't expect Ukrainians to do that with Russia. So why do we expect that of Palestinians? And it's really convenient for the United States and the European nations to proclaim organizations like Hamas as terrorist organizations because of what they do. But the thing is that Palestinians do not have a standing army like the Israelis do. The Israelis have a standing military, and that military is fully funded by the United States, which RFK said they get over $3.5 billion a year. Right. And Israel has the most advanced weaponry radar systems and the Iron Dome. So the Palestinians, when they do and when they have done these terrorist acts, it's not just because they're terrorists and they want to kill Jews. It's because it is the only mode of resistance that they see for themselves, because doing nonviolent resistance hasn't done a lot for them over the years. That's why movements like BDS started as, let's do a nonviolent way to resist, but even that gets shunned. And so it kind of leaves people with no option. So if Ukrainians get to be resistance fighters, Palestinians should be looked at as the same way. But because they get labeled terrorists, this is extremely convenient.
Mm-hmm. I think there's this narrative, and particularly on the liberal left, that says that that portrays Israel as a kind of occupying nation sitting on a Palestinian land, and the whole thing is a lie from start to bottom. And let me just tell you a little bit about the history. Israel and Jordan were part of what was called the British Mandate when the Ottoman Empire, in 1922, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed after World War I. We went to war. The Palestinians were on the side of the Ottoman Empire against the Allies. The Jews were on our side. There were more Jews in Palestine at that time than there were Palestinians. But at the end, the Ottoman Empire disappears, and so there's a lot.
Did he just say there was more people in the land called what? Called Palestine?
So there was more Jews in Palestine than there were Palestinians.
Because the land is called what? It wasn't Israel? Right?
Well, because at that time it was called Palestine.
Right.
Yeah, because that's...
And that was also at the time when being a Jew was not an ethnicity, it was a follower of Judaism. And this is something I'm still kind of struggling to somewhat understand, because this has happened since I've grown up, in the early days, in the early 90s and early 2000s. A Jew was someone that was a follower of Judaism. And lately it's turned into an ethnicity. So one of the things is Jerusalem and Palestine was a holy land. There was a confluence of 3 different major religions: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. So of course there's going to be a lot of Jews in Palestine because it's one of the 3 main religions that practice religion within the area.
Right.
So there were a lot of Jews, yes, but there weren't more Jews than Palestinians, to my understanding. That is something that he's conflating. He is.
I agree with that, because that's semantics at that point, right? Mm-hmm. Are you a Palestinian because you live in Palestine? Are you a Jew because you practice Judaism? What is the divide there? You know what I mean? You're trying to line between ethnicity and religion. That's what they're doing right there.
And I've argued with a lot of people over the years, not on YouTube, but with, just family and friends, where I'm this new, over the last 15, I would say 15, maybe 20 years, this shift from a Jew as a follower of Judaism to Jew as an ethnicity, I feel is a way to continue this anti-Semitic ballooning, so as to have more things be called anti-Semitic that aren't necessarily anti-Semitic, because they are saying, oh, this is my ethnicity and not I'm a follower of this religion.
Yeah.
And there's also Palestinian Jews too.
Of course.
This is today. I have members within my family that are Jewish. I have members within my family that are Muslim. So and also Christians, because they all came from this region and were Palestinians first, and then followers of whatever religion it was that they chose second. Right. And the clashing between Jews and Palestinians, or Jews and Muslims, it's not to say that it wasn't existing before the formation of Israel and things like that, but it has definitely been blown out of proportion in order to feed into the propaganda and the justification that Jews have more right to this land versus the Palestinians, and
it's crazy to think of. It seems it smacks of the same thing when people say, "Oh, you're transphobic if you're
anti-Semitic."
You're anti-Semitic. Thing. Now it's like you're saying, it has that same kind of feeling because obviously it's Semitic people lived in Palestine as well. So what the fuck are you talking about? How can you know what I mean? Like, how can you be anti-Semitic and Semitic at the same time?
Because people are terrified of these labels.
These
and
labels
it's the
are just
same,
insane.
It's the same thing that they do with people that when they call people bigots and then they call them transphobic or homophobic or they call you this or that or every other name. And because no one wants to be labeled as those things, because then they come after your job and they come after, you know what I mean? They label you as that. And then, they want everyone, to cancel you. And it's the same thing. I
remember back in the before times, there was a time where when someone called you something, it was because you represented something that you were. You know what I mean? Not just some conflated idea of something. You know what I mean? There's no teeth in it at all. It's just like
overused.
I know you are, but what am I? It's
all overused, and people are terrified of having something that's used and applied on them. Because then once you get that label, once you get that, that black label of, oh, you're this or you're that or you're racist or you're a bigot or you're a transphobe or you're anti-Semitic, like it's the same playbook over and over again. And we need to be able to have these conversations and find out, like, okay, well, where is that line of offense? Where does it become an offensive thing and where isn't it? And the only way we're going to find that out is by actually talking about it.
And that's why these labels are there convenient. Oh, you're anti-Semitic, so I'm just gonna cop out and not have this conversation.
Right.
Yeah, I don't talk to anti-Semites. And you're like, what? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's a coward's way out when you're calling people different names and you're not like taking the time to talk to them and get to know them and see, like, well, why do you feel that way? Even if somebody is that, why do they feel that way? Like, it is worth trying to dig into that, because if you can find that out, maybe it's a misconception they have, and maybe that's the only way that someone's going to change their mind is by actually talking to them.
Yeah. And Devin, there was a comment I saw. Devin was like, aren't Palestinians Semitic? And that is true. Palestinians are Semitic people. So especially if you're trying to call like a Palestinian, I think Richard Medhurst talked about this in a video a long while back. He's like, people call me anti-Semitic. And he's like, I am Semitic. Like, what's up? And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
Exactly.
And absolutely. And I'm so glad we're here to like debunk like this. This is the only reason like I wanted to do a debunking video of RFK. It's not really the fact that it's Jimmy's show. It's just that RFK was on it. And because there's so much that he is going around saying, and he has a huge platform right now. And I feel like we need to give people like just a little bit of clarification as to what is really happening in this like clip. Oh my gosh.